Introducing the remarkable archetype, the dangerous gentleman. With a demeanor that commands respect and a hint of potency, he embodies strength tempered by virtue. Though his capabilities could veer towards danger, he channels his power for noble causes, serving others and safeguarding those in need. Rooted in a profound love for both God and humanity, he navigates life with discipline and purpose. In his presence, one witnesses the harmonious blend of power and benevolence, a testament to the true essence of masculinity. Step into the world of the dangerous gentleman, where strength is wielded for righteousness, and discover a captivating embodiment of honor and valor.
Greetings and welcome to the Dangerous Gentleman podcast. Yes, I am the Dangerous Gentleman. No, I did not give myself that nickname, but I certainly have earned it. So let's jump right in today to what we want to talk about. You ever had someone come to you with a question or looking for some advice, maybe about a relationship, maybe about a business decision, maybe it's about how to fix their car, but they come to you because they're stuck and they don't know what to do next, and they somehow, for some reason, see you as a potential person who could answer their question. And so they present whatever scenario it is, and you give them a piece of advice. It just kind of pops into your head and you're like, You get done and you realize, you think, wow, that actually seemed like a sound piece of advice. It happens to me as a chiropractor. Someone will ask me a question, whether it has to do with their spinal health or chiropractic directly, or nutrition, or some other, even just a lifestyle thing. What should I do about this? And the answer just pops into my head. And I'm like, I sometimes will walk back to my office and I go, I actually know a thing or two. And the cool thing is that when that person comes back to you a day later, a week later, a month later, and they tell you, wow, thank you for that advice. It really helped. It really, really helped. This is what was going on. I followed your advice, and this is what happened as a result. And it gives you that little bit of a validation, and you start to, I'm not saying that you get arrogant. I'm not saying you get all puffed up, right? But it gives you some validation that maybe on a few things you know what it is that you're talking about. And then it happens multiple times, and you start to think, maybe I have decent advice for people. And then there's the times when you're going through stuff and you have a question, or you're facing a challenge and you're facing a hurdle, and you go, man, I could really use a good piece of advice. And so you go and you talk to people and they give you a piece of advice, and you do it and it works. Well, sometimes the advice that you actually need to take is the same advice that you would give other people. It happens to me all the time. As a matter of fact, it happened to me recently. So recently, I've had some issues been coming up with my office and some things that have just been going on. And they've been that way for a while. They haven't been quite what I wanted. And so as I was talking to someone about this, they're like, maybe you should do this. Maybe you should do this. And maybe you should do this. And I was like, that's really good advice. And the person was like, well, you know what? Guess where I heard that advice? And I was like, where? I heard that from you when you were talking to me about a very similar thing a few months ago. And I was like, oh my gosh, you are absolutely right. They were giving me my own advice. So that's the topic that's kind of where I wanted to go with this, is that sometimes you have to take your own advice. Sometimes it's good. Oftentimes it's good to get an outside perspective, but sometimes it's about taking your own advice. And I realized, exactly what I was telling them. Exactly what I was telling them in this particular scenario. It was my brother. I was telling my brother some things. I was encouraging him to think outside the box, to go beyond where he was comfortable with the type of job, with the type of employment situation that he was seeking. And he turns around, and that was like a month ago. And now he turns around and it worked for him. So my advice worked for him. He's like, hey man, maybe it's time you do that. Maybe it's the time you apply your own advice to yourself. And I was like, damn it, you're right. And so I'm making some changes in my business. I'm changing some things in the way that I look at things going forward. And I'm coming to the point where I'm unwilling to settle. I'm unwilling to continue allowing things to be the way that they are. And this is a lesson that I have applied to myself in a lot of other areas. In my fitness, in my overall health, in my relationships, in my church, in just my attitude towards society. Like, I've taken action and I've been unwilling to settle for the way things were in so many areas, but I had become willing to settle for substandard things in my office and with my contract and with my job. And you kind of get stuck. We all kind of get comfortable in the way things are. And you kind of just go along and you go along and you go along. And my brother and I were talking about it today again. It's like we both do that. We both just kind of get comfortable in where we are. We get comfortable in the status quo. And then, like a lot of people, we don't like to change things. Even though there's something itching in the back of our brain that's telling us this isn't right, but we don't know quite what to do. We don't quite know what to do. And I've gotten really good at being able to give that kind of advice to other people. And I've gotten really good at giving that advice and applying it to myself sometimes in some areas. But in this area, I had a blind spot. In this area, where in regards to my job and my employment, for some reason, I had become willing to settle for the way things are. I had become willing to allow that complacency to settle in. And I had become unwilling to take my advice, my own advice. I wasn't willing to listen. Like, I would talk to other people about these things, but the words were coming out of my mouth, but like they weren't reflecting back to me. And so I have to start to apply this. So sometimes you have to take your own advice. And sometimes that you have to give that advice to someone, and then that advice has to come back to you. And when it does, when it comes back to you, you recognize it and you witness to it and you're like, yep, that is exactly what needs to happen. So that's what happened to me. That's been a situation that's happened over the course of the last about week and a half in regards to some things in my business. Is I had to have someone hold up a mirror and give me my own advice. And so it was easy to recognize. When they showed it to me, I was like, oh, yeah, that's what that is. That's where it's coming from. So sometimes, maybe consciously listen when you are giving advice to others and make a mental note of that advice. And especially when that advice comes back to you and say, thank you for that, it worked. And then apply that to yourself. Don't become the mechanic whose car is always broken down, the carpenter whose house always needs a repair, the dentist with a crooked smile, or the chiropractor with a bad back. Don't become that person. Don't become that person who is unwilling to follow your own advice. Another little anecdote. So recently I've been dealing with a pinched nerve in my hand, and I just had gotten to the point where I was just suffering. I wasn't sleeping very good. I'd wake up and my hand would be numb and tingly, and then I wouldn't be able to get back to sleep. And then one night I just got frustrated with it and I didn't sleep, and I realized, you know what? I need to treat this. I need to look at this as if someone else were coming in to see me with the same issue. What would I tell them? And I would tell them that they needed to do these exercises. They needed to get adjusted on a regular basis. They needed to work on these things in order to get better. And I started to do those things, and I started to get better. And now it's not completely gone, but I'm able to sleep through the night. I still get a little numb and tingly, but I started to do some of the exercises that I recommended. I started to get adjusted regularly. So I started to follow my own advice, and it worked. So I'm applying that in two different areas for me, in regards to my business and in regards to my personal health. And every once in a while, yeah, you got to just sit back and go, what would I tell someone else if they were coming to me with the same circumstances? It's easier said than done, because there's this little thing that we all deal with called pride, and we don't want to think we have a problem or whatever it is, right? But sometimes just sit back and be like, practice the idea of, what would I tell someone else if they were coming to me with the same issue? If someone were telling me my story, what would I tell them? Just a little food for thought for this week on taking your own advice. And I hope you enjoyed this a little bit. It's been a very personal lesson over the course of the last couple of weeks for me. So I thought, hey, if it's working, if it's something that I need, maybe it's something that some other people need. So I will talk to you later. So if you like this content, please give it a rating, a review, and share it with your friends. Also, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about me and what I'm all about and what I can maybe do for you, check out my website at thedangerousgentleman.org. That's thedangerousgentleman.org. Thank you for listening.